before we get into Saturday's game at Harrogate, how's this week been? Obviously, we had that game on Tuesday where there was some crucial minutes for certain players.
Yeah, really pleased to get some extra minutes, some competitive minutes into some of the group, some of that personnel on that pitch on Tuesday. I'd missed game time due to whatever reasons, but for them to come through with some sort of result and some sort of performance was really pleasing. And the fact that we've had no injuries since or from that game is another positive factor going into the weekend. And I spoke previously about the need and the want for competition for places. All of a sudden, we've got decisions to make going into this weekend.
You take a look at Harrogate's start to the season, 3 wins out of 3, and it's come in the middle of when they had a COVID outbreak as well. So it's pretty remarkable that they've been able to do that.
Yeah, I think they played the first game of the season, was it? And then had the break of such. They're probably in a similar situation to what we were in, a few weeks back. They had it a bit worse than ourselves. But they've used that time wisely. They seem to have regrouped really well and won their 2 games since then. Really positive result for them on Tuesday night going away to Leighton Orient. We knew how difficult that game was for ourselves a couple of weeks back, and that's an impressive result. So recruited well in the off-season, a couple of players we know well in Lewis Page and Roy McArdle, but also added a little bit of quality to that team as well. And early indications are that they'll be competing towards the right end of this table. We know only too well that we only took 1 point off them last season, and that was a point away from home in that 0-0 draw. We're beaten convincingly in the home game, so we know what a tough test awaits us this weekend. But with this group of players moving in the right direction and getting fitter and stronger by the week, we're looking forward to this game.
You mentioned Lewis Page and Rory McArdle there. Is it an advantage to you that you perhaps know their style and how they play, having only been with us last season?
Not really. I don't think too much can be put into or looked into when players who've played for you previously played for the opposition. Good players, both good people, good servants for the club in the short period they were here, both here for 1 season, and we wish them success at their new clubs and at that part of their career. But just obviously this weekend we'll know them and we'll compete against them and we'll all shake hands after the game. But we want a positive result to back up what we did last weekend. Form is absolutely key in this division, and if you start playing well and start winning games and scoring goals, then you want to keep backing that up and gain consistency within that. So in terms of the personnel for the opposition, as always, we can't affect that too much. Whether that will have a too big of input on their preparation for ourselves this weekend, I very much doubt it, and we're not concentrating on that in any way.
And I imagine your players will obviously be keen and they'll be really up for it, taking that momentum from last Saturday's game, because it was quite an occasion here at the park, wasn't it?
It was, but it's been and gone. As much as it was our local derby, which wasn't local, we know all about how close we are to Bristol Rovers, and the fans that were there, both home and away. And what a good start it was to the game in terms of the 4 goals in the space of 25 minutes. But it'll be a totally different game this weekend. I said that after the game against Bristol Rovers, that you'd love to replicate that all the time. But football's never that straightforward, never that easy, and it's a different test and a different opposition, a different obstacle for us to overcome this weekend. But one which will mean just as much as the result against Bristol Rovers if we're successful. It's all about picking up points, or all about moving in the right direction and getting ourselves where we want to be within the league.
I think we saw it last season in both games against Harrogate that they are a tricky side to break down, and it's quite a small pitch up there as well, and a cosy little ground, which I don't know if that's something you feel suits the side or not.
Well, time will tell in relation to it. It didn't feel like that last season, but there was one. If you remember rightly, I think I'm right in saying that the kickoff was delayed by half an hour, if not an hour, where the pitch was slightly waterlogged and flooded, and we had to wait a period of time for it to drain. But then, obviously, when there's no fans there, the pitch feels bigger, and the stadiums or the environment feels totally different. So, I'm sure if there's people there watching this weekend, which will be, I'm sure we'll travel well in terms of our away fans with numbers. It will feel quite a compact ground. But we've got to implement our style of football, and that's to look for the space on that football pitch and to utilise that space. And before that, we can do that this weekend. We've got to really earn the right to play. It's an old cliche and so on and so forth. But we've got to get to that ball first. And we can't get there first. We've got to get there second. And all of a sudden, we'll have an element of control in relation to that game. And you're looking at their start to the season and the form they're in. That this weekend will be a good measurement of where we are. We've only been away from home once in the league so far, and we really struggled. So we need to improve on that performance.
Finally then, injuries wise, I'm guessing there'll be no Nigel Atangana this weekend.
No, unfortunately, obviously the injury Nigel picked up last weekend, we came off and then went off again in pretty quick succession. We'll keep him out of this weekend. We don't see it as being a long-term injury or a serious injury as such, but this weekend's just come around a little bit too quickly. So we hope that he'll be available the following week. It'll all depend on the work he can do in the meantime, but he'll miss the journey tomorrow, which is probably a good one to miss with it being the Leeds Festival and Bank Holiday weekend and a long way up to Leeds. But it's a shame for Nigel, and like I touched upon earlier, it leaves our central midfield positions a little bit light on the back of Nigel and Archie, both been out injured. But both players hopefully coming back in the next few weeks.
I mean, how far away would you say we probably are from Archie? And secondly, are we likely to see Josh Coley out there soon?
Josh Coley's outside. He's not training with the group. He'll do a few individual bits and pieces with the coaches next week, and then within the next week to 10 days, he'll be within the group and training with the group. And then it's a matter of time in terms of how quickly we can get him game time. Archie's still not outside as yet, but he's ticking off all the boxes he's got to do in terms of the medical bits and pieces, in terms of his body weight and how much impact he can put through that, how much weight he can put through that joint, his knee joint. And we expect him to be outside as of next week. So the moment I always speak about when players go outside and they have a ball at their feet and they're not part of the first team group in terms of training, but the moment you see them outside, you just feel they're closer to being involved. And certainly if we see Josh Coley next week and we see Archie Collins next week being outside and working to a certain level, then they're not going to be too far away, and they'll strengthen our group immensely.